about these seafaring towns. The superstition is their tall tales. I find it charming myself.
Can we talk about the fine details in the opening credits of Widow's Bay? The atmosphere immediately gives off classic folk horror vibes, something you see in a lot of gothic folk horror films. I love how carefully crafted the show feels, from the clothing and the set design to the hidden symbolisms buried in this dialogue. This episode contains spoilers, so if you enjoy these deep dives, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Also, I will be discussing the top 5 comments from my last video later on, so stay tuned for that. Keep dropping your theories because I will be doing another top 5 comments feature next week. We finally get Sarah's perspective in 1702, and let's just say Richard Warren was already being controlled by the island. Sarah entered the marriage with genuine intentions, while Richard clearly seemed more interested in finding someone to take care of his children. When Sarah first arrives in Widow's Bay, the carriage driver tells her before he arrives, this place was nothing but barren dirt. Of course, he conventionally leaves out the fact that the dirt apparently also contained human teeth. The driver continues by describing how the island suddenly became prosperous, trees blossoming, food everywhere, and mild winters. Sarah jokingly asks, does he control the weather too? But honestly, the creepy part is that the townspeople probably believe he could. They even say Richard was in communion with the island, and Sarah immediately sensed something was wrong. Not only does she witness murder, but she slowly realized Richard Warren isn't the great man everyone claims he is. He murdered his first wife and appears ready to do the same to Sarah. We even see Sarah documenting her fears in the diary, which Wick later discovers decades afterwards. Then we hear Richard explain the pact. As the townspeople prepare to bury him alive, he warns them the pact must be honored. According to Richard, the island spared him during the first winter, speaking to him through the mushrooms. He believes fulfilling the pact will stop the plague and prevent the terrors from returning. Now, personally, I think whatever communicate with Richard is the same entity Tom encountered during his True Sight experience. That's what makes the episode so unsettling. We still don't fully know what's causing the island horrors, but this episode does an incredible job connecting the island's past to its present. And honestly, it makes perfect sense that Ty West directed this episode. His style fits Widow's Bay perfectly, and if you've seen The House of the Devil, The Innkeepers, or the X trilogy, you can feel his fingerprints all over this episode. He is one of my favorite directors. I love his style of work, and I also enjoy the movie Innkeepers as well, so if you have not seen that movie, I highly recommend that you do. One thing I love is how the show handled the flashback structure. Most shows struggle with standalone historical episodes, but Widow's Bay somehow made it one of the strongest episodes so far. When Israel describes the plague victim Cornelius Evans by saying his eyes were yellow with spoiled moons, that line carries so much symbolism. Yellow immediately suggests jaundice, disease, or poisoning, while spoiled moons creates this disturbing image of decay and corruption, cosmic, like the island itself is rotten people from the inside out. One of the funniest moments in this episode is Sarah immediately spitting out the poison liquor Richard offers her. Pastor Collins later confirms that the town fears Richard, even suggests that the devil himself may have chosen him. And then we get one of the biggest clues in this episode: Richard cannot die. When the pastor sends someone to kill him, Richard is stabbed multiple times. The attacker dies while Richard walks away completely unharmed and covered in blood. That can't simply be explained away by mushroom tea, although I absolutely believe the mushroom inside Richard's necklace are connected to whatever power the island gave him. At this point, it feels obvious that the island requires human sacrifice. Richard repeatedly says, "Fulfill the pact and the plague will stop." He genuinely believes sacrificing people will satisfy the island and end the suffering. He even warned Sarah and children that trying to escape the island would doom them all. And based on the painting Tom noticed back in episode 2, the boat ride probably doesn't end well. Richard screaming from inside the coffin, "The island won't let them leave," might be one of the scariest moments in this episode, because deep down, he may actually be telling the truth. Then we return to the present timeline and see Wick digging up Richard's grave. If Richard's prophecy was real, then there's a terrifying possibility Richard may still be alive inside that coffin. Now, I also want to talk about the real historical inspiration surrounding Richard Warren. Now, I talked about it a little bit in episode 1, but I did more of a little bit of research and I just want to share this with y'all. So, I want to talk about Richard Warren and the Mayflower Settlers because the parallels are fascinating. The 66-day voyage across the Atlantic was brutal. Passengers dealt with freezing seawater leaking into the ship, violent storms, disease, starvation, and horrible living conditions. Nearly half of the settlers died shortly after arriving due to illness and exposure. Then Richard Warren himself died young, leaving behind a widow and 7 children. Even after his death, his family continued to struggle to survive in Plymouth. They historically tragedy feels deeply connected to Widow's Bay, themes of sacrifice, survival, grief, and isolation. Not to mention, back in 1702, New England experienced a significant outbreak of smallpox and scarlet fever. The epidemic spread through several Massachusetts towns and hit Boston particularly hard, resulting in hundreds of deaths during the winter of 1702 through 1703. If the Warrens' home looked familiar, that's because it's the same building is used at the Widow's Bay Historical Society in the present timeline. I love the irony there. The town literally built its history on top of lies and buried secrets. And beneath that building, there are tunnels. The same tunnels Sarah discovered back in 1702 that led to the well Reverend Bryce later visited before his death. The same well where he heard voices. Another interesting detail involving the church bells, when Richard suddenly says he has work to do on his wedding night, it happens immediately after the church bells ring. That can't be random. At this point, the bells almost feel like the island's version of a notification system, telling Richard when another sacrifice is required. And finally, I love the use of the song Brandy, "You're a Fine Girl," while Wick digs up Richard's grave. The lyrics tell the story of a woman in a harbor town who falls for a sailor she can never truly have because his real love is the sea. That mirrors Richard and Sarah perfectly. A romanticized tragedy hiding something much darker underneath. That may describe Widow's Bay itself. Here are my top 5 comments from episode 5. Patricia was spared by the boogeyman because she's the descendant of witches. This is why the book from last week's episode targeted her. The fun twist is she has no idea. Now that is a great theory. Patricia may not know what she was doing at the time, but when she burned that book, did you notice that her hand didn't burn? We have to know who the boogeyman is, that's one, but also what is Patricia's background? Because if she is a witch, that would not surprise me whatsoever. But once again, we don't know about her family yet, and hopefully we keep our fingers crossed we do in episode 8 or episode 9. I got one question for you. Do you remember Brian Morrison stole his mom's car in 8th grade, flipped it in the woods, then being asked? Now think about the calendar in episode 1. A possible theory I have is that parts of the town are covered in this fungus, just like the room in the hotel, and it basically makes you see into other dimensions, I guess. Third eye open kind of stuff. This would affect everyone differently, as hallucinogenics tend to do. When you build up a town around its worst history, it basically implements in everyone's subconsciousness, and that's why these terrible things keep getting viewed. Just a thought, as we've seen a lot of influence from other horror, just put me in mind of Haunting of Hill House with the mold room. I don't think this accounts for everything though. Let me just say this. Thank you so much for commenting your theory. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that you are enjoying my page and my theory videos. But let me tell you this. Your theory accounts for everything. I did not put two to two together at the time about the story of Brian Morrison. Of course, the fungus plays a huge role into the story and series. The fungus mole connection could explain why different people experience visions, nightmares, and strange encounters in completely different ways. I also like the idea of the town's dark history being embedded into everyone's subconscious, almost like the environment itself is feeding off fear and trauma. The hotel room definitely gave me Haunted of Hill House vibes, which I totally had missed the mark because I talked about room 1408 in The Shining, because as you can tell, I love old school horror, but I love Mike Flanagan work as well. So Haunting of Hill House is absolutely a great series, but it also tied to the perception and the psychological horror. It appears that Patricia is a tool used by the boogeyman to spread terror and to prepare the island for takeover by evil. The way the terror keeps escalating around her makes it feel like the boogeyman or evil force is manipulating events behind the scenes to weaken people's mentality and emotionally before taking full control of the island. So that is a great theory. Evan's friend is named PJ Souls, despite Linda in the original Halloween killed by the boogeyman. Maybe a stretch, but something to keep an eye on. Pretty interesting catch. The show has already shown that it loves horror reference and hidden Easter eggs. So I wouldn't be surprised if the name PJ was intentional, and being killed by the boogeyman definitely fits the theme we're seeing here. It could just be a fun nod to horror fans, but with this show, even the small details sometimes end up meaning more later on. A couple of things I noticed. This episode is about opening third eye. I love the symbolism in the show. When they enter the shaman's house, we see Tom sits in an orange chair. In the gas station, the song Amber is playing also plays during credits. This is important because orange is associated with 33, and Enlightenment think also Buddhist monks wear orange. Tom also lays on the bed next to a lizard. Lizards have a third eye in the center of their heads, known as the parietal eye. The hand drawing is important after taking true sight. It makes sense to me when you swear an oath or testify, something you raise your palm up to declare the truth. They kind of make it into a joke, but it actually deeply profound and symbolic of speaking or seeing the truth. It's ironic because the one guy that had faith and is considered a spiritual leader on the island, the pastor, could not handle the truth. The light equals the spirit. It gets cut off and out throughout the episode. It symbolized a destruction of the self, not in a bad way, but in an ego death way. I think Tom's character is about to change in a huge way. Many predictions is that he's probably going to quit caring what the town people thinks. That is a great observation, and that is a really deep dive analyst. Thank you for that. I honestly think you're onto something with the symbolism. The third eye theme definitely feels intentional throughout the episode, especially with all these references to enlightenment, perception, and truth. I didn't even catch the orange symbolism or the connection to the lizard's eye. That's actually a brilliant observation. The show seems to layer visual clues in a subtle way, so details like that probably aren't random. Your point about the hand drawing is really interesting too. Raising your hand as a symbol of truth and testimony fits perfectly with the whole true sight concept. It's almost like the show is questioning whether faith alone is enough when confronting with real knowledge or awakening. I also love your interpretation of the lights flickering. The idea of light representing the spirit or ego makes a lot of sense, especially if Tom is going through some kind of transformation or awaken. I think, and this is my opinion, Tom's truth is haunting him. He's carrying an entire weight on his shoulders of a lie that he created to his son, the townspeople, and everyone else that comes to the island. And I think that his lie is catching up with him. Let me know your theories about this episode and how would you rate it. I enjoyed the episode. Like I said before, I thought it was very good. and I loved it. I will see you in the next one.